Madoka Magica is a brilliant story, one of the few anime to truly stand out in just 12 episodes. It feels like it did everything right, even making characters who are wrong. While the entire cast has something unique to offer, I was always most drawn in by the story of Sayaka. At first as a simple kid who felt as similarly betrayed as she was, but now as something so much more. She's not just a story of despair, but everything that comes with it as well. A self-made labyrinth of hopes and dreams that starts as a beautiful motivation and ends as nothing more than an ever-shrinking cage. A tale of the exact point where selflessness meets selfishness, and how that plays into the hopes and dreams that create a purpose that can only end in one way. While the anime may bear the name Madoka, there's no character who better represents the magical girls of their world than Sayaka. Madoka and Homura experience an exceptional tale that shifts the fate of the world. Sayaka is simply a fate in that world, a fact which makes our story today all the more crushing. I think before we say anything else, it's important to acknowledge something Madoka and Sayaka say themselves.
Have you ever wanted something so bad, you'd trade your life for it? We can't figure out what to wish for, because we don't know what it's like to want something that bad. We're blissfully ignorant to any kind of suffering.
The anime is very diligent in reminding you of this line at every chance. Look at the school these girls go to. It's at the point where elegance almost transitions into pure gaudiness, filled with the latest and greatest tech, not to mention its grand structure. And their lives at home aren't much different. They each have large, full rooms, Madoka living in a modern paradise and Sayaka in a quite stylish building, her own room complete in a traditional style with nothing lacking. Before they become magical girls, their problems are quite easy as well. I mean, the entire true opening to the anime is half an episode of simple boy problems and fawning over the new student in their class. They're worried about appearance and young love and what to do after school, just living peaceful, calm lives with really nothing to ask for. Despite this, they're never shown as uppity or somewhat despicable for a high stature in life. The fact they recognize this about themselves speaks for volumes of maturity, almost oddly so for their age, and especially when contrasted against characters like Hitomi. Going further, I'd say that another well-off character, for the most part Kyosuke, is intentionally the opposite of Madoka and Sayaka. He's very limited on screen time, so most of what we see in him is in with these moments with Sayaka, and despite his understandable reasoning for the hatred he has, these moments make him all the more unlikable. Sayaka has obviously been giving her all to him even before she had a wish. She would rush over there with the music she thought he loved, sit by his side for probably hours, and genuinely wished for his well-being. And he never does anything even remotely similar for her. The most he does is lash out at her for trying to help, only deepening the sorrow she feels that forces her wish later. He acts similarly to a spoiled child who didn't get their way for the first time, yet his deeper reason for being upset invokes some compassion. And this is one of the most important details that feeds into Sayaka's character. She rewards his behavior. By wishing for Kyosuke to become better, he gets to avoid growing in any way, or realizing that he has someone amazing by his side the entire time, or changing into a better version of himself. His story is sad, but there's any number like his. They become about making a bad situation into a great one and being your best despite the odds. His is about avoiding those things, aided by Sayaka's selfless wish on his behalf. Whether she acknowledges it or not, she's part of the reason why he can throw her to the side so easily despite her best intentions. It's saddening to think that her real wish could never be because of her own actions. To think that the wish within her would be unfulfilled forever. But the very idea of a true hidden desire in her contract, that says even more about her. We can call her choice to place the benefit on someone else selfless, but I think that's just looking at the surface of the situation. For all her faults and omissions, one thing Mami did do was warn about the dangers of wishing for someone else, specifically saying,
"If you use your wish to grant someone else's, you should be careful you know exactly why you're doing it."
And this is exactly where Sayaka fails. She's unable to live with the pain Kyosuke is in, and gives in where he couldn't, allowing the karma of the universe to heal his body. In this action and the person who becomes from it, we can see a less selfless side to kindness. One of the topics I've harped on for years is the war in ethics between the ends and the means. The philosophical battle between Jeremy Bentham and Immanuel Kant, the former saying the result of an action is what determines worth, and the latter that the reason the action was taken is what matters. This provides us with two ways to look at kindness. One where it's most often right and pure, leading to a positive outcome, and that's what matters. And one where it can be just the opposite. Sayaka clearly has ulterior motives in her wish. She wants to be with Kyosuke and sees his healing as a way to make this happen, for him to be happy and one day be happy with her. If this is why she did it, hoping that it would lead to their relationship, then it's much less selfless under these rules. But we can also see it as something else. Say she did so because she simply couldn't stand to see him in pain anymore, her heart broken and his body's trauma. Helping someone for this reason is aptly referred to as kindness, empathy in its purest. But is that also a brand of selfishness? She couldn't handle his pain anymore. But she didn't have to live with it and feel it true like he did. His act of being hurt by no fault of his own caused her so much pain that she had to do something about it. But that was his pain, not hers. No one's experiences invalidate others, but does she have the right to be more hurt than he is, losing his entire goal in life? Is helping someone in pain because it also causes you pain really for that person, or simply because you want to feel better too? He may be a very unsympathetic character, but she makes herself weaker than him by removing that pain. If she stayed by his side, worked with him to become someone better, persisted through her empathetic hurt, maybe he could have emerged as a new man, one ready to give life his all once more in some other capacity. Maybe able to see a new perspective where he appreciated her will and accepted her desire. They could have grown stronger together. But wishing him back to health was the fast way out, and the one that rewarded his bad behavior and crushed any chance of appreciation. A band-aid that covered the wound but did nothing to actually help it heal. Sayaka's kindness in this moment was also a misplaced weakness. Sayaka's downfall is less like a sharp decline and more like a complete drop-off. Once a pillar of optimism and joy, she ends her role the picture of despair. It's honestly quite the shocking contrast, and one that might seem overboard simply because the boy she loves was picked by someone else. We covered how she tied so much of her being to his destiny, but even with that in mind, it's a quickly degenerating situation. This is where we start to fill the gaps from my previous Madoka Magica video on Mami Tomori. You don't need to watch that for this video, but I'd recommend it if you want to explore a bit more about the tragedy of Sayaka's role model magical girl. And that is exactly the problem. I'll summarize here, but Mami was a very imperfect woman who was adept at appearing perfect. She was lonely and depressed, but spent her time helping those in need anyway. Smiling the whole way, dispatching enemies with elegant attacks, she becomes the picture of what a magical girl should be for Sayaka, as she never witnesses her moment of weakness like Madoka does. Never believing that she led them into this life simply to end the loneliness she felt for so long. What Sayaka knows of her is the image of perfection, an ever-caring and endlessly kind girl who puts the magical girl she sees later to shame. With this initial idea in her head, she makes the decision to go against Mami's warning and use her wish on Kyosuke, likely thinking her to be doing it for him, not herself. Her life, as Mami's was, becomes heavily ingrained with the identity of heroism, a form of kindness that knows no bounds. So seeing girls like Homura or Kyoko who act in overly selfish ways naturally drives her crazy. They never mention a hint of care in their hunts save for themselves, simply the capture of more grief seeds to extend their lives. They mock the typical magical girl attitude as naive, and we do have to say with good reason. They're on the side of logic. Even with pure intentions, if they didn't try to find grief seeds, then they would just perish, and it was all for nothing as they turn into witches themselves. Living their lives according to some perfect code just isn't possible. But Sayaka is on the side of emotions, not logic. Not only are they stomping on the life she chose, but they are also disrespecting the memory of her beloved mentor just by existing as they do, not even to mention when they do so openly. And the part that shows just how important this wish and that life was to Sayaka is how she never shifts her perspective to see Mami, and by extension herself, as wrong. It might seem natural that she would slowly shift to become more like Kyoko, someone who started with their own perceived heroism, but slowly fell into a self-serving way of life. That she would see the harsh reality and adapt to keep on living. Surely she would grow to see the perspective of someone actually quite similar to herself. But she never does. Because if she does, then what is her purpose? Mami instilled in her being to live for helping others, and she applied this concept not just to her powers, but the origin of them in healing Kyosuke. Now he's inadvertently rejected her, ridding her of that purpose, and then she learns there's no way to be a true magical girl. To allow yourself to persist, you have to let others perish. You might say she could change her mind, but it would require changing every aspect of her new, narrow identity. She defined herself around two things, and so she paid the price. Instead of shifting, she dives deeper and deeper into the justice she touts until it becomes its own form of evil. A justice which serves only a slimmer and slimmer section deemed worthy by impossible standards. Putting on blinders as she does, sticking to her guns is the same as staying herself rather than making the near impossible change. Sure, she takes a path that ends only in pain and sorrow, but the physical anguish must be easier for her than admitting she sold her soul for a lie. A lie not just from Kyubay, but also a lie from herself. There's another layer to admitting she was wrong. If she suddenly accepts that being a magical girl isn't the compassionate and heartfelt calling it seems, then the other reasons behind it would also naturally come into question. The reason why she made her wish would be on the table. It might be a dead purpose, but it's still a reason for her current state, and it's easy to question. Sure, she's known Kyosuke for years and has always been by his side from what we see, but how much of that is true in what we don't see? She was affectionate to him while he was hospitalized, but what about before then? Was she more like Hitomi, watching from the sides and falling in love from afar? How well did she really know Kyosuke? Bringing him classical music to no avail, did she never see he loved the performance more than the art? How true and pure really was this love she made a wish for? These are questions we can't answer, but the inclination could go either way. And she's a young girl. Love to her is something much different than it would be in, say, 10 years. But right then, as far as she was concerned, she had used her wish for love of him, and the want of his love. To admit that she was wrong is also to start to admit that maybe this was wrong also. Maybe her intentions weren't as pure as she made herself believe. I mean, being distraught at Kyosuke just being with another girl, it's impossible to quash the jealousy anyone would feel. But jealousy of Hitomi doesn't just mean she has to try and become a better person or move on. It means that the loss of her soul was because she wasn't as good of a person as she believed. This is something no one could countenance in an instant in such a short amount of time, so it's no surprise Sayaka uses all of her might to keep the mindset that she is the bringer of justice and hope and joy. She's not wrong, the others are wrong. Kyoko and Homura are just selfish, using their gifts for their own good, something she isn't doing, so she couldn't have made a selfish wish. The choice is clear. Be a bad person alive, or a good one and die. The resolve to exist in this state is all-encompassing though. Eventually, everyone must be questioned as impure for you to stay pure, and even her best friend is no exception. When Sayaka interrogates Madoka for being what she thinks is a terrible friend, it comes off as entirely unreasonable because it is. It's the culmination of everything we just covered, and it shows just how far her mind had to go for justification. Even the picture of purity, Madoka was no longer good enough for Sayaka's justice. It also provides a deeper look into this mentality. As things slowly start to slip away from her, it feels as if she's given up her entire life for others. The danger she faces to save flameless citizens, her wish so Kyosuke could live his life, even taking all the pain so Madoka and Kyoko wouldn't have to fight. Being a good person becomes a matter of sacrifice for her validation. and so everyone should be doing the same, lest they be a terrible person. So when she says to Madoka,
"You won't even give up your humanity out of pity for a friend."
it sadly makes sense in her head, because she already has for everyone else. Madoka, as a simple, regular girl, could never do anything sacrificial for Sayaka. She was there in every moment, a shoulder to cry on and support at every turn, but in a matter of life and death, this started to matter less and less to the soon-to-be witch. Her reality was harsh, and in turn, she became harsh as well. She's given up so much, lost everything, so why does no one else do that for her? Except someone did. And on the verge of losing the last friend she had, Sayaka starts to see her own cracks, the ones she never saw with Mami. Running away from Madoka in the rain, Sayaka cries, questioning herself like she hasn't before, pondering why she would say things that were so terrible. This is the start of the end, where the burden became too big to bear. With that fight, she had nothing left. No friends, no purpose, not even anyone to save, since she had twisted justice into something only the fully pure deserved. And so Sayaka's later moments are spent undoing the good she imparted on the world. When presented with some of its plainest ugliness, she snaps, presumably taking lives in the process. And her motivation here, no matter how shitty these men seem, is from her own failed dream. She focuses on the exaggeration of everything she never had, rightly calling them out for their reprehensible behavior, but placing her own fears and doubts into what they say. They're awful, but she forces them to be worse. Sayaka continues the level of selfishness she showed Madoka here. A selfishness rooted in compassion and a desire to protect the world. A justice that becomes so righteous it turns to tyranny. A pain that comes from wanting balance. A balance in give and take in good and evil. The karmic balance she fulfills with the transition to a witch. Her final act beforehand is fitting, apologizing to Kyoko for causing trouble and saying,
I can't remember what I thought was so important, what was worth protecting, you know?
And naturally, she would forget what she was fighting for, why she endured so much pain and slipped so far. Because what she was fighting for was dead and gone. Mami and the idea of a perfect magical girl died before Sayaka ever even was one. Her relationship with Kyosuke that never was to be and she felt could never be once she had lost her soul. The kindness she wanted to show a world that wasn't lacking it, but that she couldn't perceive ever again. I think it's safe to say in her final apology and with the line, "I was so stupid," we can say she saw her own mistakes and the flaws of her character that she crafted around herself. Especially in admitting it to Kyoko, the one who drew so much of her hatred. Like she can now understand why. Why Mami tried to be so genuine. Why Kyoko tried so hard to be solidary, and how they were both wrong. Understand why Kyosuke wouldn't even think of loving her when she allowed him the path to live without her entirely. Why Madoka couldn't help her when she expected so much from someone who thought herself to be capable of so little. Sayaka's story is one where she finds the answers, but only because she reached the end of her life. The path she chose ignored reality for hopes and dreams, and the only way to bring her back to reality was to crush those very same hopes and dreams. Her death was always tied to this revelation from the very moment she made that flawed contract. The very moment selfishness was bonded to selflessness. A wish and a curse, the karmic balance of the universe. That is the fate of Sayaka Miki and the fate of a magical girl. So that will finish off our video here for today. I'm just going to get right into things with this one. Like the video if you didn't, dislike if you didn't, leave me a comment letting me know if you thought I missed something, if there's something else you want to add to the discussion, if there's another anime you'd want to see me cover. Getting to see those comments and your own thoughts and different things is always the bright spot of a lot of my days, so go ahead and leave those down below. I'll have some links in the pinned comment to my Twitter, Discord, and Patreon, which I probably don't need to describe respectively, but in order if you'd like to keep up with me on Twitter, if you want to reach out to the community or me in general on Discord, or support the content in the channel and help us grow and improve your viewing experience here, like these wonderful people on screen right now. subscribe thing and more videos on screen as well if you would like to stick around or check out something else. And I'll just say thank you for watching, and I hope I'll see you again soon.